The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide, open plains, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The air was dry, and the wind carried the faint smell of dust and grass. A lone rancher rode slowly along a narrow trail that cut through the rocky canyon. His horse moved carefully over the uneven ground, stepping lightly to avoid tripping on stones or hidden roots. The rancher was tall and strong, with skin tanned by years of working under the scorching sun. His hands were rough from handling ropes and cattle, and his eyes were sharp, always scanning the land for any sign of trouble or opportunity. He had been riding for hours, checking his herd, and ensuring that nothing had wandered too far from the grazing area. The canyon was quiet, almost too quiet. Even the birds seemed to be watching from a distance. The rancher was used to silence. It was a part of life in this harsh land. But today, something felt different. There was a strange stillness that made him slow his horse even more. He looked to the side, toward a cluster of jagged rocks that jutted out from the canyon wall. At first, he thought it was just the shadow of the morning sun. But then he noticed a faint movement. A figure was lying among the rocks. It was a woman, and she looked as if she had not eaten or slept properly in many days. Her hair was tangled and dusty, and her clothes were torn and worn. Her body was so thin that it seemed almost fragile. And her eyes, wide with fear, darted around as if she expected danger to come from every direction. The rancher felt a pang of concern. He had seen many things in his life: injured animals, lost travelers, and even a few people who had run into trouble, but this woman looked like she had suffered more than most. He dismounted from his horse slowly, not wanting to startle her. The woman flinched at the sound of his boots on the rocks. She tried to pull herself back, her arms trembling as she held onto a small rock for support. The rancher raised his hand slightly, showing that he meant no harm. "Hey there," he said gently. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Are you hurt?" The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. She shook her head, then looked down, too weak to speak. The rancher could see the fear in her eyes, but he also saw something else: a deep exhaustion, as if life itself had been pressing down on her for a long time. He knelt a few feet away, keeping his distance but still close enough to offer help. From his saddlebag, he pulled out a small piece of bread and a flask of water. He set them on a flat rock nearby and spoke softly. "You look hungry." The woman's eyes flicked to the bread and water. She hesitated, her body stiff with distrust. She had been captured and forced to survive under harsh conditions for so long that trusting anyone felt impossible. But her body was weak, and her stomach was empty. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she reached out and took the bread. Her fingers trembled as she held it, and she took a tiny bite, barely chewing before swallowing. Then she drank a little water, her lips brushing the flask with careful movements. The rancher watched quietly, giving her space but not leaving her alone. He could see that she was still wary, but he also noticed that her breathing was becoming steadier. She was alive, and she was starting to regain a small amount of strength. That was the first step. After a few minutes, the rancher spoke again, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You're safe now. I'm going to help you." The woman's eyes widened, and she pulled back slightly. She was not used to kindness. For a long time, she had only known fear, hunger, and pain. Trust was a dangerous thing, something that could be taken away in a moment. But she was too weak to run, and she had no other choice. Slowly, she nodded, almost imperceptibly, as if agreeing to accept the help that had been offered. The rancher reached out carefully, helping her to her feet. She swayed, too weak to stand without support. He put an arm around her back, holding her gently, and guided her toward his horse. She leaned on him, relying on his strength, while he murmured words of reassurance. "It's okay. I've got you. You won't be alone anymore." As he helped her climb onto the horse, the rancher realized that this was not just about saving a stranger. There was something deeper here. A responsibility he could not ignore. The woman had survived hardships that he could only imagine, and now it was his turn to protect her. He adjusted the blanket so she could sit more comfortably and climbed onto his own horse. The animals moved carefully, as if sensing the fragile state of the passenger they carried. The journey back to the ranch was slow. Every step of the horses was measured, careful, as if the land itself understood the fragility of the moment. The woman was silent, watching the scenery pass by with wide, cautious eyes. Occasionally, she would glance at the rancher, as if trying to decide whether he could truly be trusted. He did not push her to speak. He knew that trust could not be forced. It had to grow slowly, like a plant in the desert, nourished by patience and care. As they rode through the canyon, the rancher thought about the words he would say to make her feel safe. Finally, he spoke, choosing them carefully. "You're mine now," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. The woman froze at first, misunderstanding his words. They did not mean ownership, in a cruel way, but rather a promise that he would keep her safe, that no harm would come to her as long as he was near. It was a strange way to speak, but in his mind, it was the only way to show commitment. The woman did not respond immediately. She was still too cautious, still too used to being on her own, to understand that this was protection, not control. But she did not try to escape. That small act of staying near him was her first acknowledgement that perhaps this stranger could be trusted. The canyon narrowed, and the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. The air grew warmer, and the horses' hooves kicked up small clouds of dust with each step. The rancher kept talking quietly, telling small stories about the land, the animals, and his life as a rancher. His words were simple, but they had a calming effect. The woman listened in silence, occasionally nodding or glancing at him, absorbing not just his words but the sense of safety they carried. By the time they reached the edge of the plains, the woman's strength had returned slightly. She could sit upright without leaning heavily on the rancher, and her eyes no longer darted around in constant fear. It was still a long journey ahead, but the first, most difficult step had been taken. She had accepted help, and she had survived. When the ranch finally came into view, a modest but sturdy homestead surrounded by wooden fences and grazing cattle, the woman looked at it with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. The rancher could see the questions in her eyes. This was a new world for her, one of safety and routine, and it would take time to adjust. But she was no longer alone in the wild. She had a chance to live, to regain strength, and to find some sense of normalcy. The rancher led her off the horse and guided her toward the house. He had seen many things in his life, but helping this woman would be different. It was not just about survival, it was about trust, kindness, and giving someone a second chance at life. And as they walked together toward the ranch, he silently promised himself that he would do everything he could to keep her safe. No matter how difficult the road ahead might be, the journey from the canyon to the ranch was longer and more difficult than the woman had expected. The trail stretched through rocky hills, dry riverbeds, and scattered patches of scrubland. Each step of the horses was careful, but the sun beat down relentlessly, making the air thick and heavy. The woman, still weak from days of hunger and hardship, clung tightly to the rancher. Every now and then, her small hands trembled as she held on, not only from fatigue but also from the uncertainty of trusting someone again. The rancher rode beside her, steady and calm, offering quiet words of encouragement. "We're almost there," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Just a little longer." He knew that fear was not something she could shake in a moment. It had been built over months, maybe even years, of struggle. He had seen small signs of life returning to her. Her eyes were no longer clouded with complete despair, and she had taken in water and food without hesitation. That was progress, and he had to protect it. As they moved forward, the woman began to notice small details of the land around them that she had missed before. The dry grass shimmered gold in the sunlight, and the occasional wind stirred up the scent of sage and earth. Birds flew overhead, calling to each other, and distant hills created shadows that danced slowly as the sun moved higher in the sky. It was a harsh and unforgiving landscape, Yet it was beautiful in its own way. She had never thought she would see it with new eyes. Not while she was trapped in fear and hunger. The rancher glanced at her occasionally, noticing her quiet observations. He smiled slightly, though he said nothing. He understood that she was slowly opening up, that her mind was starting to absorb the world again rather than merely surviving in it. For her, each small moment of awareness was a victory. For him, each step forward was a promise being kept, that she would be safe, that she would recover, and that she would eventually feel something close to trust. At one point, the trail narrowed, and the horses had to carefully navigate a steep slope. The woman tensed, gripping the rancher's arm tightly. He reached for her hand and squeezed it reassuringly. "It's all right," he said. "I've got you. Nothing will happen." The woman's heart raced, but she slowly relaxed under his steady presence. For the first time in many days, she felt that she could let someone else carry some of the burden. She didn't have to survive entirely on her own. Along the way, the woman began to share small pieces of her story. She spoke quietly at first, almost to herself, recounting memories of her village, the people she had known, and the events that had led to her capture. Her voice was shaky, and she paused often, struggling to find words. The rancher listened patiently, never interrupting, only nodding to show that he was hearing her. Her words were not long or detailed, but they were enough to reveal the hardships she had endured, the long marches, the hunger, the fear. The rancher did not ask questions that might have made her uncomfortable. He understood that she needed to choose what to share, and he respected that. Instead, he offered small reassurances. "You're safe now," he said. "You don't have to go through that anymore." Her eyes softened slightly at his words. They carried no judgment, only promise and protection. In a way, those words were as nourishing as the water and bread he had given her earlier. They reminded her that someone had chosen to care for her, not out of obligation, but out of genuine concern. As the hours passed, the woman began to notice other things about the rancher. He moved with confidence, guiding the horse carefully over rocks and uneven terrain. His eyes were always alert, scanning the surroundings for danger. She realized that he had spent a lifetime learning to read the land, to understand its risks and its rhythms. And yet, despite his strength and experience, there was a gentleness in the way he treated her. He never hurried her, never forced her to move faster than she could. He was firm, but there was patience in every action, a quiet understanding that she was fragile and needed time. They stopped occasionally so the woman could rest. During these breaks, she sat on a rock while the rancher fetched more water and offered her snacks from his supplies. The sun moved slowly across the sky, and the canyon shadows shifted with it. She watched the patterns of light and shadow with a sense of calm she had not felt in weeks. It was strange to feel calm in a world that had been so cruel to her. She began to realize that there might be a future beyond fear, a life where she could regain strength and hope. The journey was not without challenges. At one point, a sudden gust of wind kicked up dust and loose rocks, and the woman flinched, gripping the rancher tightly. "Don't worry," he said, shielding her with his body. "I'm right here." She took a deep breath and tried to steady herself, realizing that she was not alone in facing the difficulties of the world. With him beside her, the wind and dust seemed less threatening, the journey less frightening. As they continued, the woman began to notice more than just the physical landscape. She began to notice the sound of the horse's hooves, the rhythm of the wind through the rocks, and the subtle movements of the rancher as he guided her. These small details, once unnoticed, became anchors in her mind, signs that she could rely on someone else. Each moment of attention, each gentle word, slowly built a fragile trust between them. By the late afternoon, the ranch came into view. Its wooden fences, grazing cattle, and small homestead looked like a safe haven in the wide, open land. The woman stared at it, a mixture of hope and anxiety in her eyes. She had never seen a place like this, never imagined that she could belong somewhere outside of fear and survival. The rancher noticed her gaze and gave a small nod. "Almost there," he said. "You're going to be safe now." As they approached the ranch, the woman felt a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. She had survived the canyon, survived hunger and fear, and now, she was about to step into a new world. She realized that this journey was only the beginning. Safety, comfort, and trust would not come all at once. They would grow slowly, like a plant taking root in dry soil, and she understood that she would have to let go of some of her fear if she wanted to embrace this new chance at life. The rancher led her down the final stretch of the trail, helping her off the horse and guiding her toward the house. He showed her where she could rest, and offered her fresh water and a warm cloth to wash her face. She hesitated at first, unsure of how to respond, but eventually, she accepted, realizing that she was being cared for in a way she had not experienced in a long time. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that someone genuinely wanted to help her, that kindness could exist even after so much suffering. That night, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of orange and purple, the rancher made a small fire outside the house. He cooked a simple meal of bread and vegetables, offering some to the woman. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that she was no longer struggling to survive alone. The warmth of the fire, the steady presence of the rancher, and the soft sounds of the evening all combined to create a sense of peace she had not felt in a long time. She realized that this journey had changed something inside her. She had survived the canyon, endured hardship, and taken the first steps toward trusting another person. And though fear still lingered, she could feel hope beginning to grow. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that she might find safety, friendship, and perhaps even a new sense of family in this rugged land. The next morning, the ranch woke slowly to the soft golden light of the sun. Birds chirped in the distance, and the faint rustle of wind through the grass carried a sense of calm. The woman woke on a simple bed in a quiet corner of the ranch house. She blinked several times, adjusting to the light, and took in her surroundings. The room was modest but clean, with wooden floors, a small table, and a window that overlooked the grazing fields. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of safety. The harshness of the canyon, the hunger, and the fear seemed far away, replaced by a cautious curiosity about what her new life might be like. The rancher was already awake, feeding the horses in the small stable behind the house. He moved with quiet efficiency, familiar with the rhythm of ranch life. When he saw the woman watching from the doorway, he offered a small nod and a kind smile. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well. We have some chores to do today, but we'll take it slowly." The woman hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had spent so long relying on herself, fending for herself, that the idea of taking direction from someone else felt strange. But she also understood that this man had saved her life. And for the first time, she felt willing to follow his lead. She nodded slowly and stepped out into the cool morning air. The ranch was quiet, except for the soft sounds of animals and the distant movement of cattle. The rancher led her to the small barn, showing her how to feed the horses and check the water troughs. His voice was patient, never rushing her, explaining each task in simple terms. "Start with the water," he said. "Make sure it's clean and fresh. Then we'll check the feed." The woman followed his instructions carefully, her hands trembling slightly at first. She had never worked with animals before, and the size and strength of the horses intimidated her, but the rancher stayed close, offering guidance and gentle encouragement. "It's okay to be nervous," he said. "They won't hurt you. Just be calm and speak softly." She tried to mirror his calmness, whispering to the animals and moving slowly. Gradually, the fear that had been her constant companion began to ease. The horses seemed to respond to her gentleness, nuzzling her hands and allowing her to brush their coats. As the morning passed, the woman discovered small moments of joy in the routine work. The sound of the horses' hooves, the smell of hay, and the feel of the sun on her skin created a sense of normalcy she had not experienced in a long time. The rancher noticed the small changes in her demeanor, the way her shoulders relaxed slightly, the faint curiosity in her eyes, the occasional small smile. He did not comment, knowing that trust and comfort could not be forced. Instead, he continued to guide her patiently, letting her adjust at her own pace. After the barn work, the rancher led her to the fields. The cattle grazed quietly, and the wind stirred the tall grass in gentle waves. He showed her how to check the fences, repair any broken posts, and make sure the herd stayed together. The work was tiring, but the woman found herself appreciating the steady rhythm. Each task completed gave her a small sense of accomplishment, something she had not felt in months. During a short break, the rancher brought out a small meal for them both. They sat on a fallen log, sharing bread, cheese, and fresh fruit. The woman hesitated at first, unsure of how to interact with someone else in a casual setting. But the rancher spoke softly, asking her simple questions about herself, her favorite foods, her memories of home, small details that did not feel threatening. She answered quietly at first. But gradually, she began to speak more freely. Her voice, soft and cautious, revealed a glimpse of the person she had been before hardship had taken its toll. As the day went on, the woman started to feel a connection to the ranch. She began noticing details that made it feel like more than just a place to recover. The way the sunlight reflected on the wooden fences, the soft lowing of the cattle, the rhythmic clatter of the horses' hooves, it all created a sense of harmony. For the first time in a long while, she felt that she could belong somewhere. The rancher, observing quietly, saw the change. Her movements were becoming more confident, her eyes less fearful, and her gestures less hesitant. In the late afternoon, the rancher introduced her to the small village nearby. He did not force her to interact, only walking alongside her and speaking quietly about the people and the surroundings. Villagers waved and called greetings, some curious about the new woman at the ranch. She felt nervous at first, unused to friendly attention, but the rancher's presence gave her courage. She began to answer with small nods and murmurs, realizing that these people meant no harm. Back at the ranch, the woman took part in more chores, learning to help with cooking, cleaning, and maintaining the household. Each task was simple, but important, giving her a sense of purpose and routine. The rancher observed her quietly, offering help when needed but allowing her space to learn and grow. The woman began to notice small ways he cared for her, leaving fresh water nearby, making sure she had warm clothing, and offering encouragement when she completed a task well. These gestures, small as they were, began to chip away at the fear and distrust that had long held her captive. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the woman sat outside, watching the horizon. She felt a mixture of emotions: gratitude for being saved, fear of losing her newfound safety, and curiosity about what her life could become. The rancher sat beside her, not speaking, letting her absorb the quiet beauty of the evening. She felt a strange comfort in his presence, a sense that he would protect her without demanding anything in return. Over the next few days, the woman's strength continued to return. She learned to ride a horse, to milk the cows, and to manage small tasks around the ranch. Each accomplishment brought a quiet pride. She began to speak more openly with the rancher, sharing her thoughts, feelings, and small stories of her past. He listened patiently, never judging, only acknowledging her courage and resilience. Through these shared moments, a bond began to form. A bond built on mutual respect, understanding, and the slow growth of trust. At night, they would sit by the fire, and the rancher would tell stories of the land, the animals, and life on the ranch. The woman listened intently, sometimes asking questions, sometimes offering her own observations. These quiet evenings became a source of comfort, a space where she could relax and feel safe. Slowly, the walls of fear and isolation she had built around herself began to crumble. She realized that she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live. The villagers, noticing her progress, began to treat her with gentle curiosity rather than suspicion. She started to engage in small conversations, learning the rhythms of the community and finding her place within it. The rancher continued to support her quietly, offering guidance when needed, and celebrating her small victories. The woman began to understand that life could be both safe and meaningful, that she could rely on others without losing herself, and that trust was not something to fear but something to nurture carefully. By the end of the week, the woman had transformed in small but significant ways. She moved with more confidence, spoke with a quieter strength, and began to carry herself with a sense of dignity she had almost forgotten. The rancher observed her progress with quiet satisfaction. He knew that the work of recovery was ongoing, that trust and comfort took time to develop, and that every small step mattered. In these early days at the ranch, the woman learned that safety and care could coexist with independence. She realized that the rancher's initial words, "You're mine now," were not about ownership in a harsh sense, but about protection and responsibility. She began to understand that someone could care deeply for her without controlling her entirely, that trust was a choice she could make slowly, and that her life could once again have hope and meaning. As the days turned into weeks, life on the ranch began to settle into a rhythm. The woman grew stronger each day, her body regaining weight and her hands becoming steadier from chores. She could ride horses for longer periods, carry water without struggling, and even help with the cattle. Yet, despite the physical recovery, a storm of emotions brewed quietly within her. Trusting the rancher, letting herself rely on someone after months of hardship, was not easy. Every kind word, every gentle gesture, brought comfort, but it also reminded her of the vulnerability she had once avoided at all costs. The rancher noticed her hesitation. He could see the small moments when her eyes would flicker with fear, when she would tighten her hands or tense her shoulders without realizing it. He understood that trust was fragile and could be broken in an instant. He never pushed her, never forced her to speak or act before she was ready. Instead, he let her take small steps, letting her regain confidence at her own pace. "It's okay to be cautious," he would say, his voice calm. "You don't have to rush. Take your time." His words became a gentle reassurance, a reminder that her past did not have to define her present. Yet, inner struggles persisted. Some nights, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the days before the ranch. Memories of hunger, fear, and captivity haunted her. She wondered if she would ever truly feel safe, if the kindness she had received could be trusted to last. She feared that one mistake, one misstep, might take it all away. The rancher, aware of her sleepless nights, would sometimes sit quietly outside her window, keeping watch without disturbing her. His presence was a silent promise that she was not alone, that protection and care were constants she could rely on. The emotional tension between them was subtle but real. The rancher had his own struggles, though he rarely spoke of them. He had grown used to solitude, accustomed to relying only on himself. Protecting the woman was a responsibility he had accepted willingly, but it also stirred feelings he had not expected: concern, admiration, and a deep desire to ensure her safety. He realized that his earlier words, "You're mine now," had been more than a promise of protection. They had been an attempt to anchor himself as much as her, to claim some certainty in a world full of unknowns. Their interactions became a careful dance. The rancher offered guidance, but he did so with respect and patience. The woman accepted it, though sometimes reluctantly. She would follow his instructions during chores but occasionally pause, her mind wandering to questions of independence and freedom. She wanted to be strong on her own, yet she could not deny the comfort of having someone she could trust. These moments of tension were natural, and both understood them without needing to speak. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence together, a small misunderstanding arose. The woman thought she had done a task incorrectly, and she withdrew, feeling embarrassed and frustrated. The rancher noticed immediately and stopped his own work. "It's all right," he said softly. "Everyone learns at their own pace. You did well." His reassurance was not patronizing but sincere. Slowly, the woman exhaled and continued the work, feeling the warmth of understanding rather than judgment. Small moments like this became the foundation of their trust. Despite the growing bond, fear lingered. The woman often found herself wondering if she would ever fully belong, if the rancher's care could be absolute, or if the world outside would intrude and undo the fragile safety she had found. The rancher, in turn, felt the weight of responsibility. Every action he took, every word he spoke, carried the potential to strengthen or weaken her trust. He approached each day with care, knowing that healing was not a straight path but a journey filled with ups and downs. Evenings became a time for quiet reflection. The woman would sit by the fire, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent, absorbing the gentle rhythm of the ranch. The rancher would join her, sharing stories of his past or describing the land. These shared moments were simple, yet they carried profound meaning. The woman began to see the ranch not just as a place of survival, but as a home. She realized that trust could coexist with independence, that relying on someone did not diminish her strength. The woman also began to teach the rancher small pieces of her own life and culture. She would speak of the traditions she remembered, the songs her people used to sing, and the customs that had shaped her. The rancher listened with genuine interest, learning from her experiences and showing respect for her heritage. These exchanges created a bridge between their worlds, a quiet understanding that strengthened their connection, without words of demand or expectation. Yet, moments of doubt still surfaced. There were times when she would pull back, questioning whether she could ever fully feel secure. She worried about the possibility of being abandoned or misunderstood. The rancher, aware of these fluctuations, did not chastise her, but offered patience and consistency. "I'm here," he would say. "I'm not going anywhere." Over time, these repeated affirmations began to chip away at the lingering fear, allowing trust to grow incrementally. The woman also faced inner struggles regarding her own sense of identity. She had been reduced to survival for so long that the idea of being cared for and respected was almost foreign. She wrestled with guilt at accepting help, fearing that it made her weak. Yet, through the rancher's unwavering support, she began to understand that strength was not only about self-reliance, but also about recognizing when to accept care and support. Slowly, she redefined what strength meant for herself. During the days of hard work and quiet reflection, small gestures of kindness became meaningful markers of their relationship. The rancher would offer a warm blanket after a long day, or leave fresh water near her resting spot. The woman, in turn, began to show appreciation in small ways, helping with chores, sharing her thoughts, or simply being present in the quiet moments. These exchanges were subtle, but they spoke volumes about the growing bond between them. As the weeks passed, the woman's confidence began to increase. She could manage tasks independently, make decisions about daily chores, and even help with the animals without guidance. Yet, she no longer felt the need to carry the entire burden herself. She had learned that relying on someone else did not mean losing her autonomy. It meant creating a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. The rancher noticed these changes with quiet satisfaction. He knew that true trust was earned gradually and could not be forced. The woman's progress was a reflection of her courage, her resilience, and her willingness to accept care without surrendering herself. Each small step forward reinforced the bond they shared, creating a foundation that was both strong and gentle. By the end of this period, the woman and the rancher had developed a rhythm that combined work, quiet reflection, and shared experiences. They had reached an unspoken understanding. She could rely on him for protection and guidance, while he could respect her independence and honor her past. Fear still existed, but it had become manageable, softened by the trust that had been nurtured over days and weeks. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, the woman sat by the fire, reflecting on the journey she had traveled. She realized how far she had come from a state of fear and weakness to a place of safety and growing confidence. She understood that trust was not something given lightly, but it could be built carefully, with patience, consistency, and understanding. The rancher, sitting beside her, noticed the quiet change in her demeanor. He did not speak, only offered the comfort of his presence. She reached for his hand briefly, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. In that small touch, there was acknowledgement of care, of safety, and of mutual understanding. They had reached a point where fear and trust could coexist, where independence and reliance were no longer contradictions but parts of the same journey. In these quiet moments, both the woman and the rancher realized that they had been transformed. She had begun to heal emotionally and physically, learning to trust and care for herself in a new way. He had learned the depth of responsibility and the patience required to nurture someone's trust and safety. Together, they had created a space where both could exist fully, without fear or hesitation, in the harsh but beautiful landscape of the ranch. The days on the ranch had grown steady, carrying with them a sense of rhythm and familiarity. The woman had fully settled into a routine of chores, animal care, and quiet moments with the rancher. Her body was strong again, her hands steady, and her steps confident. She moved through the ranch with an ease she had not known for many months, her fears slowly replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging. But beyond the work and the routine, there was a deeper change happening within her, a sense that she could finally breathe freely, that the world was no longer entirely hostile, and that life could be lived with hope. The rancher had observed these changes with quiet satisfaction. He had seen her hesitance give way to courage, her fear soften into curiosity, and her loneliness transform into cautious trust. For him, these days were not just about teaching her to care for the ranch, they were about witnessing her transformation into someone who could stand tall in her own strength, yet allow herself the comfort of companionship. The bond between them had grown deep, built not on obligation, but on mutual respect, patience, and understanding. One morning, as the sun rose and spilled gold across the fields, the rancher called her to help with the cattle. The woman moved confidently, her voice clear as she guided a group of young calves to a safe grazing area. The rancher smiled to himself, noting how far she had come. The woman's attention to detail, her gentle handling of the animals, and the quiet decisiveness in her movements were proof of her resilience and growing self-assurance. It was no longer just about survival, it was about living, contributing, and finding meaning in the rhythm of everyday work. During a break, they sat together under a large oak tree, sharing bread and fresh water. The woman watched the rancher carefully, noticing the faint lines of care etched into his face, from years of hard work, yet softened by the calm patience he offered her. She realized that she had come to trust him fully, not out of fear or necessity, but because he had proven himself to be dependable and kind. His protection had never been a constraint. It had been a gift, allowing her to regain her strength and confidence without losing herself. The woman began to reflect on her past, not with despair, but with a quiet acceptance. She remembered the days of hardship, the hunger, and the fear. Yet she no longer felt the same weight of despair. Instead, she felt gratitude for having survived, for having found someone who believed in her enough to care. The rancher, in turn, began to reflect on his own growth. He had always been self-reliant, accustomed to facing life alone. Yet, in protecting her, he had discovered patience, compassion, and the quiet rewards of seeing someone flourish under care and guidance. As the sun climbed higher, the woman and the rancher returned to their chores. She tended the horses, checked the water troughs, and helped move the cattle, with a steady confidence that had grown naturally over weeks of practice. She no longer needed constant guidance, yet she appreciated the subtle ways the rancher supported her. His occasional nod of approval, the small advice he offered when necessary, and the gentle reassurance that he was always present. Each day reinforced their mutual trust, creating a bond that was strong, steady, and filled with quiet understanding. Evenings on the ranch became a time of reflection and connection. The woman and the rancher would sit by the fire outside the house, sharing stories and observing the vast sky as it shifted from golden to deep purple. They spoke of the land, the animals, and simple memories from the past. Sometimes, the woman shared stories of her childhood and her people, describing songs, traditions, and the beauty of her homeland. The rancher listened attentively, asking gentle questions, never judging or interrupting. Through these exchanges, they built a deeper understanding of each other, a connection that transcended words and rested on shared respect and care. Over time, the woman began to notice that her fear of dependence had faded. She realized that relying on someone did not make her weak. It allowed her to grow stronger, to rediscover her own abilities, and to embrace the future with hope. She had come to understand the rancher's initial words, "You're mine now," not as possession, but as a promise of protection and care. They had been a starting point for the trust and security that had blossomed into something far deeper than either had expected. The rancher, for his part, had learned the power of patience and quiet dedication. He had discovered that guiding someone with kindness and respect could create a bond stronger than fear or control ever could. He admired the woman's resilience, her willingness to face hardship, and the courage it took for her to allow herself to trust again. Their relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect, understanding, and shared responsibility. One afternoon, as they worked together to mend a broken fence, the woman spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "I never thought I could feel safe again," she said, her eyes meeting the rancher's. "But now, I think I can." The rancher paused, looking at her with a calm intensity. "You've always had strength," he replied. "You just needed the chance to use it without fear holding you back." She smiled faintly, a smile filled with both gratitude and acknowledgement. In that moment, she understood fully that she was no longer just a survivor. She was someone capable of living, of contributing, and of trusting without losing herself. The bond between them continued to deepen, marked by small gestures and quiet understanding. The rancher would offer help when needed, but never overstepped, allowing the woman to assert her independence. She, in turn, began to anticipate his needs during ranch work, offering help without being asked, and sharing insights she had gained from her own observations. Their relationship became a partnership built on mutual care, trust, and the recognition that both could flourish together. As the days passed, the woman began to feel a sense of belonging she had not experienced before. The ranch, the animals, and even the simple routines of daily life became part of a larger world she could navigate confidently. She had learned to balance independence with reliance, fear with trust, and past pain with present possibility. The rancher had provided a safe environment, but it was her courage, resilience, and willingness to embrace trust that allowed her to truly transform. Even the villagers, who had once regarded her with curiosity, now welcomed her presence. She participated in small community tasks, shared stories of her experiences, and slowly integrated herself into the rhythm of life outside the ranch. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a part of a community, a person whose presence brought warmth and hope. At night, as the fire crackled and the stars appeared overhead, the woman reflected on her journey. She had come from a place of fear and scarcity, through danger and uncertainty, to a place of safety, strength, and trust. The rancher had been a guide, protector, and companion, but the transformation had been hers as much as his. She had learned that vulnerability did not mean weakness, that trust could be earned and nurtured, and that hope could emerge even in the harshest landscapes. The rancher, sitting quietly beside her, felt a sense of fulfillment he had not expected. Protecting her had not only saved her life but had also enriched his own. He had learned patience, empathy, and the quiet joy of watching someone grow beyond the shadows of the past. Their journey together had forged a bond of respect, trust, and shared resilience, something rare, quiet, and profoundly meaningful. As the weeks turned into months, their partnership continued to flourish. The woman became confident in her abilities. The rancher remained a steadfast presence, and together, they built a life marked by stability, care, and mutual respect. The lessons of fear, survival, and dependence had been replaced by understanding, trust, and a shared sense of purpose. In the end, the woman realized that she had been given more than safety. She had been given the opportunity to live fully, to grow, and to trust. The rancher realized that he had gained more than responsibility. He had gained a companion, a friend, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his care had made a lasting difference. Together, they looked toward the future with hope, confidence, and a shared sense of belonging. The harsh landscapes of the ranch, once intimidating and overwhelming, had become a place of growth, learning, and quiet beauty. Each sunrise and sunset reminded them of the journey they had traveled, the trust they had nurtured, and the lives they had rebuilt. And in that space, between the wide open plains, the gentle animals, and the simple routines of life, the woman and the rancher had discovered something rare and profound. A connection rooted not in fear or ownership, but in care, respect, and the shared journey of healing and trust.